Hello, good afternoon. Welcome again to the next session here at the Capacity Building Hub, which is entitled, if we can have the title of the session, it's a very interesting session. It's called Once Upon a Time, Capacity Building Stories. And it's a session under the Youth4Capacity initiative. And we have a very distinguished panel, and I'm sure this event will attract your attention. This session basically seeks to showcase the stories of young people in the climate action landscape that have transitioned from being capacity recipients to being capacity builders. Yes, because young people are both capacity builders and capacity building recipients. Through an active exchange of knowledge, experiences, and innovation, young people, climate leaders, will share their experiences, and this event seeks to foster a space for mutual learning and dialogue. Participants would gain insights on the role of young people and their capacities in delivering ambitious climate action. The session seeks to inspire and empower youth to take a leading role in the capacity building efforts as the capacity builders that they are. Before handing over to our colleagues, I have the pleasure of welcoming Mr. Obais Sarmad, the Deputy Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC Secretariat. Mr. Sarmad, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Alejandro, and it's a pleasure for me to be here at this event. This is the Capacity Building Stories for Climate Action, and especially hearing from the youth. It's extremely important. I do not know whether it is we providing the capacity building, or in fact I strongly believe it's the youth who is building our capacity to ramp up our action and to make sure that we do the right thing for the future. The Capacity Building Hub is a space for representation, collaboration, as well as intergenerational dialogue. And today's theme of capacity building with action for climate empowerment, Article 12 of Paris Agreement, aims to create a space for meaningful representation and facilitate collaborations across sectors, regions, and generations. The youth is an essential voice at the table in the entire climate change process, and youth mobilization is integral to addressing climate change. This is reflected in the Action for Climate Empowerment that you know, ACE, as well as through the engagement with youth organizations such as Youngo, the official children and youth constituency of the UN Climate Change, as well as through the mandates of various constituted bodies and processes under the Convention. And we're very encouraged to see the first ever pavilion of youth and children at this COP. As the UN Climate Change Secretary, we are very much committed to seeing young people and their voices included meaningfully in these spaces and many more across the COP and beyond. While the importance of strengthening the engagement of youth is widely recognized, there are capacity needs and gaps to be addressed in order for young people to effectively engage in climate action. In this regard, this year, the UN Climate Change Secretariat, with the contribution of the Italian Ministry of Ecological Transition, set up the Youth4Capacity initiative to contribute to building the capacities of young people on climate change. As I said right in the beginning, it works both ways, that you need to build our capacities as well. But it is also important to acknowledge that young people are not just recipients of capacity building, but are capacity builders themselves. And through this capacity building stories that we're going to hear by Youth4Capacity initiative, I look forward to listening to the stories of young people that have transitioned from being capacity recipients to capacity builders. It is important that youth are offered a permanent seat at the table in decision-making process. And we are fully committed, and I personally acknowledge that they are equal partners. It's because it's about their future. So on behalf of UN Climate Change Secretariat and Youth4Capacity initiative, I would very much like to thank all young people present here today and beyond for all the work, and I look forward to listening to your capacity building stories. And thank Alejandro and team and the capacity building team here of UNFCCC for organizing this and bringing us together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Wes. He's always our biggest supporter. All the young people in the room, please take note. That's the person you need to reach out to for all of the engaging process, or how to get engaged with the UNFCCC process as a young person. He's always very helpful in like having a quick chat, and lovely to have you, Wes. Thank you so much for being here. And all right, first of all, I'd like to begin with, is this your first time at the Capacity Building Hub? Please raise your hand if it's your first time at the Hub. Okay, so I see a couple of newbies. Is it your second or third time? Anyone been here before over the last 6 days? I see Roberta's here. So Roberta's definitely been here for more than 3 hubs at least. Fantastic. So I want to take this opportunity to do some cheeky little plugs, because I think that's important as well. We're at this place and we want to know what the hub is about, right? So the Capacity Building Hub is hosted by the Paris Committee on Capacity Building, the PCCB. If you want to know more about the work of the constituted body, there are banners over there. You can scan the QR code. The working groups and the functioning of the constituted body is all over there. But the PCCB also has a very special place for young people in terms of mainstreaming their voices across its work through its work on cross-cutting issues, the working group 2. Last year, the PCCB also organized the Youth in Capacity Building series, which was a fantastic series across the regional climate weeks and had great conversations, regional conversations where young people led these conversations. So there's a lot of work happening in the PCCB, the capacity building team. My boss is right here, Alejandro. We support the PCB in delivering this. So there's a lot happening in the capacity building space. There's a lot happening in the Action for Climate Empowerment space. There's a lot happening through the regional collaboration centers. Essentially, young people are all across the UNFCCC process, and rightly so. So through the Regional Climate Weeks, we actually reached out to a couple of our young delegates, youth experts, youth activists around all of these climate weeks, and we have a little bit of a video for all of you to watch. So if my colleague Eva could please cue the video.
Capacity building for you is one of the many elements that as youth we need in order to be fully integrated into the climate negotiations and climate discussion spaces. When we talk about capacity building, we're expecting to not only receive, but only to have more like an exchange of experiences between different stakeholders.
Los jóvenes recibimos capacidades, pero también las creamos. El rol, el papel que juegan los jóvenes, las juventudes, en realmente crear capacidades sistémicas y también crear la necesidad de ver problemas relacionados a conciencia política, conciencia social y conciencia climática.
We need to incite the interest for youth to get into the climate movement, or at least to know about the climate crisis.
L'action pour le climat est au top de mes priorités, parce que là, ce n'est plus un choix, ce n'est plus une option, mais c'est quelque chose que je suis personnellement en train de vivre.
L'engagement des jeunes n'est vraiment pas une passion, mais il s'agit bien d'une raison. Une raison qu'on doit classer prioritaire, parce qu'il y a une urgence. Et l'urgence concerne vraiment l'implication collective de toutes les jeunes et aussi des acteurs politiques.
Not only are we the biggest demographic of the world, and not only do we suffer the most and disproportionately from climate change, but we are also a very natural and a key and an equal stakeholder to the climate agenda, because we care about our future and our health and the health of the current and the future generations. And for us to be able to do that, we need to be part of the policy making space of climate change in a way that is meaningful.
Youth has a lot of diversity within it. We're talking about people from indigenous communities and local communities, people from coastal communities, people from the LGBTIQ plus community that are usually left behind. So these processes need to integrate these different spaces with a view of intersectionality that helps to integrate youth participation more actively, but also sustain and balanced way.
Having funding for projects from people from different part of the MENA region, teaching them more about climate change, climate justice, introducing them to how you can be an activist, how you can get more engaged.
Invest in young people both technically and financially in the small scale as well as the large scale grassroots and groundbreaking solutions that young people are already leading. We are not the victims. We are already creating our own advocacy, our own solutions for climate change, for our health and for our planet.
Yo creo que se debe dar importancia y se le debe dar prioridad a la creación de habilidades que nos permitan crear y mantener relaciones interpersonales en el futuro, como el trabajo en equipo, como el pensamiento crítico. Ese tipo de relaciones son las que nos van a permitir crear lazos y alianzas.
Youth will not stop. That's what I do believe in. I'm hoping more in youth because I know our actions will never stop.
Fantastic. So that was the framing for Youth4Capacity. We've started off the initiative. We launched it at Africa Climate Week. And we're looking to do more. The capacity building teams, the ACE teams come together and are working on it. But yeah, I don't want to take more of your time because we have a fantastic panel here. You saw two of those faces on our video as well. So without any further ado, first of all, I would like to thank Alejandro and Oves for being here. But yeah, over to Omnia El Omrani, COP27 President's Youth Envoy. Over to you, Omnia.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, perfect. So hello everyone. So happy to see many familiar faces, and thank you for joining us in our session on storytelling and capacity building. I would like to first of all share how much I love this the video that really demonstrates how we as young leaders in climate change are passionate around building our own capacities, elevating one another, empowering each other with the solutions, with the knowledge, with the skills and the competencies to address climate change. But this session is also about the amazing leaders that I'm so happy to moderate the discussion with, to really learn from their success stories and from their journey on how they became really inspiring young climate innovators, entrepreneurs, and solution makers, and how did capacity building facilitate that. So I'd like to first introduce our speakers. We have, first of all, Joshua Ampansim. He's the founder of the Green Africa Youth Organization, GAYO. And we also have with us Chris Cameroon, a scientist and filmmaker from the Clear Environmental. Next up, we have with us Moraki Kazumi. He's the president of Carbon Capture Research Institute. And then finally, we have Eddie Frank Vasquez. He's the official youth delegate to the Dominican Republic, and he is the founder of Juventus. I'm close. So I'd like to first of all ask Josh. So tell us about your journey. Okay, how did you found GAYO, and how did capacity building, your experience with that, help you found your own organization?
Thank you very much, Omnia, and I'm happy to be here. So my journey to start GAYO was really a journey of being in a school during my bachelor program, learning so much about climate change and global environmental change, and realizing that there is so much sort of solutions that we talk about in the classroom, but once you get out of your classroom and you go to everyday life, the problems still exist. And so that was a starting point for me, and realizing that, okay, what can we really do about that? So it was coming together with students, going to communities, trying to learn from communities on the challenges they face, but also how they are already dealing with some of these challenges. And I think earlier today I was saying to a panel that concepts like adaptive capacity, coping capacity, and some of the terminologies we use, sustainability, circular economy, all of these are technologies that are fundamentally being practiced in many communities, and we study them in a classroom and we put a title on it and we make it look very attractive, but these are principles that are existing in communities as a whole. So for me, it was really being able to connect what I was learning in the classroom, but also what I could learn from communities. And I think that capacity building as a journey for the organization as a whole has been a fundamental part, because learning is not from one particular space. Learning comes from different spaces. And a lot of the learning we had or we thought we could get was by signing up to a course or having someone standing in front of us and teaching us something. But through the organization setup and working with many grassroots communities in project development, we also learn a lot from just everyday conversations with people, particularly those who are facing the problems that we talk about a lot and are already living with it. I think their stories are really powerful, and there's a lot of capacity in that, even though we do not necessarily see them as spaces that we could learn from. I think for me that has been one of the biggest lessons that I've learned. So capacity building has been a big part of the journey, both in terms of formal education, but also informal education and sort of life lessons as well.
So a small follow-up question to Josh. So can you tell us more about your organization and how it aims to build capacities as well to others, and how you bring in your experience to your people?
Yes, so GAIO is a youth-led organization that is currently having over 25 employees together with consultants, all youth-led. Our goal is to really create a space where young people who have passion for the environment, passion for climate, and pursue academic programs on this have a space that they can actually develop themselves professionally. And the reason why we do this is because I realize that in many cases in the developing world, Ghana, Sub-Saharan Africa, a lot of development projects that are designed and implemented requires a lot of foreign consultants, a lot of flying, do some scoping research, produce a short report, design a project in Europe or somewhere in the US, come in and implement. And that was a big challenge for me because I could see a lot of young people in my class or in my school who had the passion, who had the interest, but they lack a place where they can actually develop professionally to meet the same sort of demand on consultancy and development, the development sector. So that was our goal, that we will create an organization where young people will really be able to pursue the goals that they have and not study environmental science and end up working say, in a bank or as a taxi driver, which for me was sort of a talent waste and also waste of the education sector for Sub-Saharan Africa, where young people study one program and end up not utilizing the education, the skills, the knowledge at all, and work in a completely different sector because those spaces are professionally not viable for them because they are fresh out of school. And development agencies wouldn't hire them directly. They'll rather bring in a foreign consultant. So that was one of the goals that we have. And so far, we've achieved very significant results. We've had a GAIO, sort of young GAIO employee who came out of bachelor program, worked with us for 2 years, and later on could apply to become the city advisor for the mayor of Accra and the C40 Cities Initiative and got selected for the job. I have my co-founder Desmond, who is currently coordinating the Africa-wide Zero Waste Initiative across the continent for Gaia, which is an international organization. And both of these roles were previously occupied by people who were very old and have sort of a PhD and many years of experience. And for us, having those two case studies of having very young people below 30 occupying positions that were previously occupied by sort of very old international recruited people is already a success story, and we want to keep doing more of that.
Okay, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. So now we have a guest who just joined us, Arshana Suring. She's our inspiring climate activist, as well as a member of the UN Secretary General Advisory Group on Climate Change. So we'd like to ask you, as a very inspiring climate activist, how did capacity building help you do what you are advocating for, especially for the rights of indigenous youth and youth from local communities? And what was your experience? What inspired you to keep on what you're doing?
Thank you. Thank you, Omnia, and thank you everyone for giving me this opportunity. I truly believe that capacity building is very integral to engage in climate action processes, because when I started, it was very difficult to look upon to anyone in terms of indigenous perspective and engaging specifically from Asia, because I felt one of the key things which we saw is like indigenous elders and ancestors have been advocating for rights of indigenous people, have been advocating for forest rights, land rights, and all of this. But climate change, climate action, these terminologies were very new. But what helped me realize when I pursued education and when I got connected with the youth movement and elders movement on land rights and forest rights and climate action movement is that we may have different terminologies, but it is all intersectional. So I think it's really important to have that community who is engaging in these spaces, specifically when it comes down to young people, because it all comes down to contextualizing the issues which we are facing, which now I can feel that the communities and my elders which were speaking about land rights, forest rights, it's so integral to climate action discourse. So I feel capacity building is also all about contextualizing the issues which we are facing on grounds and to the international policies and decision making processes which is happening. The second thing which I would like to emphasize about capacity building is often people have this tendency and approach, specifically for young people and indigenous people and local communities, that we don't know anything and we need to be taught and we need to learn. But that's not the case. I think it should come from a place of respect, and it should come from a place of understanding that the indigenous people, young people are contributing in their own way. What capacity building can we give to enhance this? Not rather than impose other developmental worldviews and other way of capacity building. Because for example, like the community leaders know about land rights, know about forest rights, know about the traditional knowledge and practices. We need more capacity building of contextualizing those. We need more capacity buildings to amplify those. We need more capacity building to know about this difficult process of climate negotiations, about the laws and policies which is there, because it's barely being translated in the language which is spoken on ground. So I think again capacity building should come from a collective effort in a place of learning and sharing rather than imposition. The third thing which I feel is really very critical is that, to be honest, it's very difficult to read laws and policies because of the terminologies, jargons, and we need capacity buildings to synthesize that, to make it more easy to reach out to communities. And we need capacity building also how to articulate ourselves. We need capacity building to access financial resources. We need capacity building to more organize ourselves in a more effective way. So I feel capacity building is really, really critical in this process, but capacity building should be with mutual understanding and with free, prior and informed consent, and with a collective decision of identifying what are our challenges, where we need the capacity building, and not fitting one attempt or one compartment of capacity building modules to people from different regions, because different communities and different regions need different needs of capacity building. So I feel it's really critical to also see that like I often say this, but I would like to say this here also, like indigenous people and local communities have been looked down upon for years because of their culture, tradition, language, and now all of a sudden the world is recognizing the role of indigenous people. The world is recognizing the importance of indigenous people, and if someone comes, you need capacity building to engage in these processes. I'm still juggling with my identity crisis and still learning my language and my community. I don't need capacity building in your approach. I need more of a place of capacity building. I need more of a place which is safe and enabling to embrace myself, to know about my culture, to be proud of my culture, and it is only then I'll be engaged in this capacity building processes more efficiently and be an advocate. So I think that's really important to have a lens of respect and solidarity.
Thank you. No, I couldn't agree more, and I also believe that it's important when we're building our capacities that we do it together in terms of having not just mentors but also being youth, empowering one another, because we understand our own needs and the challenges that we face. So always peer-to-peer is very important because we understand our realities as well. So thank you for that. I'm going to move on to Chris. So tell us, I know that you are a filmmaker, and through your work in Clear Environmental, what inspired you and to start working on that specific issue on climate change? If there's anyone as well that was the source of inspiration, and how was your capacity built towards such a creative and very important field?
Thank you. So I'm not actually a filmmaker. I'm a scientist, but I work in digital storytelling. So I guess in a sense that I do make films, but I kind of want to highlight what my two colleagues were both talking about youth, building the capacity of youth. And I find that most of the time when I'm working with organizations or with communities, I'm learning so much from people my own age, even about the process that happens at the UN. Everything I've learned about the UN structure is from people my own age. And I believe that because of the issues that are going on, the youth, we have to actually be the ones that implement the action, and we will adapt to it by learning from each other. And I was talking to a couple friends today about this. Whenever there's a job posting, I don't know if this happens to you, but the job posting will say a couple of requirements, like you need to know Excel, you need to know different software. And a lot of the times we just say that we can do it because we're desperate and we need the job, we need the money. And I feel the same way about working for the future to adapt to the world that is our reality. We're gonna just have to build each other's capacities. We're gonna have to learn on the fly how to exist, essentially. But that being said, I work in communities that are being affected by industry. And in particular, my project on digital storytelling is focused on the southern United States. There's an area called Cancer Alley. It's along the Mississippi River in Baton Rouge. And it has 152 petrochemical plants. And this area is a residential area that's a predominantly black neighborhood. And at this point, the amount of lead and aluminum in the air has been absorbed into people's bodies. There's a woman, Sharon Levine, who is an activist with Rise St. James, the community-based organization there. And she has been filmed multiple times. There's lots of videos online. But the way that she speaks about how she commits to raising awareness for her community, even though she knows she's going to die there, it's a dire situation. And so the work that I try and do is bring the voices to places like here, like COP, so that people understand that it's a reality, that people are living in toxic waste every day. And there's no time for false solutions. There has to be immediate action. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I can also ask Moraki to share. You are also a scientist and a social entrepreneur and the president of the Carbon Research Institute. So you can tell us about your journey and, from being a scientist to being a president of your organization, and how did capacity building help you reach that?
Hello, my name is Kazumi Muraki. I'm from Japan, and I just came here 5 minutes earlier this session starts. So yeah, I was in a very hurry to come here. But actually, I'm a representative director at the Carbon Recovery Research Agency located in Tokyo, Japan, and we are called CERA for that is a independent research organization to halt climate crisis and also realize Martian colonization by using technology to stop climate crisis. We have experts of direct air capture technology and also carbon to fuel technology. And I'm also a scientist, especially like a chemistry, chemical engineering or organic chemistry. And then my journey started, over 12 years ago when I was in first grade student in elementary school. Actually, now I'm 22 years old. I'm the first grade student of the University of Tokyo. And then when I was in first grade, my grandfather gave me a book called George's Secret Key to the Universe, written by Dr. Stephen Hawking in England. And then in that story, the main character of the story was named George, discovered the planet that we human can live, except ours. And then I was very impressed by the story. And then it says Mars is the most suitable planet for us to live, except ours. And then I really wanted to go to Mars, and also I really wanted to do Martian colonization. And then in the story, the picture of the sunset on the Mars was there, and then there was a vast red surface, and then blue sunset went down. So I was very impressed to see that picture, and then I really want to go to Mars as a first Martian. Yeah. So I started my research to live on Mars. And then I knew that 96% of the Martian atmosphere was constituted of carbon dioxide. And then I started research to remove carbon dioxide from the ambient air and then make some useful materials such like fuels for rockets and so on. And then when I was in high school, I just came up with a new direct air capture machine called HIASI. There are so many direct air capture technology around the world, like a Climeworks or Carbon Recycling International or Lanzatech or Carbon Engineering and Global Thermostat, etc. But their machine is brilliant, but very huge to put every houses, every home, or like every office. And I realized that if there were a machine that you can individually remove carbon dioxide from the air at your home or at your office, that's a cool idea, I thought. So I invented the world's smallest direct air capture machine called HIASI. And then, there is my colleague, over there and over there and over there. And they have brochure of my machine. So if you are interested in, let's, please say, And then in high school, I came up the machine, and then there was cool program called Innovation Program by the Japanese government, by the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications, and then they gave me approximately about $30,000 to make the machine come true. And then I could finally realize the machine. And then after I entering university, I found CIRA, and then we have 18 researchers to realize ways to halt global warming, and then convert carbon dioxide into alternative fuel. Our fuel alters ordinary diesel fuel, so yeah.
Amazing.
We are doing some kind of research, so yeah, this is my story.
Amazing, that's very inspiring, and you're inspired at a very young age to do your research and to come up with a very innovative solution. And thank you for sharing your inspiration. Now we're going to move to Eddie. And first of all, because, you know, for many COPs, we've been advocating for having more youth representation, especially in official country delegations. And you are now representing your country, so I'd love to know how this happened and how did capacity building help you be in this position?
Thank you. So first of all, I think that hearing the stories of all my friends and colleagues here, there's 3 points I would like to highlight. The first one is that as youth, we access capacity resources. The second one, we create capacity spaces. And the third one, that we disseminate in capacity spaces. And taking into consideration those three perspectives, there's many histories behind each one of us that we can maybe spend the whole night or week talking about. But my history behind started 7 years ago. 7 years ago, I started participating in different kind of climate-related spaces in the Dominican Republic. And I realized that these spaces were lacking youth people, specifically in my country. Coming from a small island developing state, realizing that we face climate change issues on an everyday basis is something pretty hard, because sometimes you think that our histories are not taken into consideration. And the way that I did it is just, I started to go to the government's meetings and to the government workshop without any kind of invitation. So I was already there. They were not going to say no to me. And I started to listen a little bit about what they were talking about. And somehow I started to participate and integrate myself. And by the end of the first year that I was participating, I remember that I was on the first INDC workshop of the Dominican Republic before the National Determined Contribution was created. And there was a specific component about youth participation that was related to how youth was involved into the NDC. And I remember that I was having so much criticisms about that involvement because youth was only considered as recipient of the capacity building component of the NDC back then. And I was saying, okay, we are the recipients, but what are we going to do with that knowledge? Is that enough for us? Is that enough for the strategy? Is that enough for the country? It's not. So 1 year later, I started my own organization called Juventud Sostenible, which is Sustainable Youth in Spanish. And we decided that the best way to approach to this kind of situation where youth people have the opportunity to shape public policies was creating of our own capacities. And we started to advocate for that. So far, we have created 2 academies for the SDGs, in which we, let's say, that create under an intergenerational perspective. We bring specialized people from the United Nations office in the Dominican Republic to teach youth people about the SDGs agenda, specifically on the SDG 13 and SDG 10 on reducing inequalities. And after that, and after this whole process, we start a multiplying capacity process for the youth people where they become, let's say, the multipliers in their own communities in the first level. In their communities, in their schools, in their universities, and then in the other spaces that they belong to. So far, we have done 2 versions of this academy. We have graduated 100 students of this academy. Let's call them trainees. And it has been such an amazing journey because sometimes the government just call one of our trainees and tell them we need 1 youth people to educate the rest of the government officials about something specifically. And it's about giving the opportunity of youth people to access, create, but also disseminate capacity building resources. And that's what I will say bring me here. A couple of 3 weeks back, we celebrated a conference of youth and climate change in the Dominican Republic. And it was a conference for youth people, created by youth people, and between youth people. And it was such an amazing experience because youth people were the one creating the capacity of other youth people inside the conference, where yes, government officials were invited, but they were on a second phase of the organizations, but youth people was the focus of this process. So I will say that just a recommendation, and taking into consideration the history of each one of us here, is like we can be a recipient of capacity building. We need it. We need it in order to be more technical, to understand this kind of conversations and to be involved. But we also need the resources and the spaces to create our own capacities and disseminate the ones under the histories that we have that can also help other people behind us.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think, before we move on to the questions, I'd like to do just a quick highlighting of what has been mentioned, because we started with the importance of how young people can empower each other and how we can take the lead. We're not waiting for the experts. But on the other hand, we need to also identify the needs of our communities, then the capacity building needs of young people by ourselves. And then we also talked about the importance of communicating the unacceptable realities that many of our most vulnerable communities face, as well as doing the right research and seeking inspiration and being persistent. And then finally, as Eddie said, to disseminate the capacity building, not to just be recipients, but to be our own builders and teachers to our own demographic. So before I move on to any questions, I'd like to invite Tridi to come for a really cool game.
I thought you were starting that game. But yeah, I think we can start that together, yeah? Should we start the game together? All right, so here's what we're going to do. Actually, we kind of took the idea from Joshua over there. He did this last year at the Resilience Hub. So we are going to envision what a perfect future looks like to us as young people, or if you're not young, that's all right as well. Just what a future looks like, right? So Omnia, do you want to start off with a prompt? You're the first person that starts off. I take the mic, and then we go around the room, and then we finish up with Eddie.
Oh, okay. So once upon a time, there was a young girl named Hermione.
Once upon a time, there was a young girl named Hermione, and it was her first time at COP27. So I'm going to pass the mic around, and you're going to have to continue the story. And it doesn't matter. It can be something really simple as like, I don't know, she was at one pavilion or she went to something. So something simple. So again, once upon a time, there was a young girl named Hermione. It was her first time at COP27.
And she got lost the first day.
And she got lost the first day. That sounds about right.
And was my first time as young negotiators too. As a young negotiator.
So it was also her first time as a young negotiator. Remember, we have to end up at an ideal future, right? So let's pivot it in that direction.
Once she started getting in deep of what's happening in COP, she found it that some opportunities they may take her ethics and independency and started fighting for them.
So she started engaging in the climate action process. That's pretty much it. And then Alejandro, what do you have to say?
And then she got to speak to President Biden.
Oh, she got to meet Biden. So that's like President Biden, and that's a good one. So here we are, Chris. She met President Biden, and then...
And then she negotiated an option to actually get the carbon pricing framework finalized.
That's a big one. She got the carbon pricing framework finalized after speaking to President Biden. On to you now.
And she got him to hire, like, let's say, 100 of youth negotiators in his team to implement that.
Fantastic. So she mobilized other young people, being the hype person to bring her crowd together, and got a lot of other negotiators on board as well. And then
she realized that no one is too small or isolated to make a difference.
That's a very, very cute statement to make, and I think we all go with that as well. So on to the next person.
She got offered a job at the White House, which she had never expected would happen one day for her after meeting Biden.
So she met Biden, she got the right she got that approved, and then she mobilized the crowd, and then she got a job at the White House as well. So that sounds fantastic in terms of just everything one small person can do.
She got a job at the White House, and she started to share her experiences with other people.
So she started sharing her capacity building story at the White House. So that's exactly what we're doing here. And then I think I would like to invite Eva to join us in the story as well. So she got a job at the White House. She started sharing her capacity building story. And then what did Hermione do?
She spread the capacities to other young people and encouraged them to, she empowered them. That's what she did.
So she spoke to other young capacity builders, and then the process went on. And this is exactly what we're doing with this entire session. I know I missed a couple of people, but I was trying to get the full circle. But I'll continue over here, so we end up at Eddie.
And then she realized that US is just one part of the world. And she then made an effort to reach out to youth globally and interact with leaders globally and work towards climate action and more so attaining Paris Agreement goals.
And afterwards, she realized that that is not enough, and the ultimate is to become the UN Secretary General. So she started aiming for that.
And then she took a nap because this is a lot of work. But she did it all.
Well, how can I say? Well, she finally became the... Oh, you just said Secretary General of UN? Well, his idea was brilliant, so I don't know what to say, but she finally maybe... she's her nationality was not yet. Okay, right. So maybe next, she became Secretary General, and then maybe she became the President of the United States or so.
Okay, so I will tell the whole story. Once upon a time, there was a pretty young girl, which first time was at COP27 and got lost the first day. She started as a young negotiator and started engaging with other people. She spoke with Biden, and she got the carbon pricing framework finalized. She started to mobilize more young people, got a job at the White House. She started to share a story about how she do that. And she met a lot of people when she realized that U.S. was only one part of the world. She realized that she became U.S. Secretary General, took a nap because she was too tired, and then she became President of the United States, I guess. And by that time, she already solved the climate crisis. So that's the end.
Back to you, Omnia.
Thank you so much. I think now we can go back home from COP. The climate crisis is solved. So one last thing I would love to ask if anyone has any questions for our amazing speakers. We'd love to take any question from anyone. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for your speeches. It's very interesting to hear you at COP. I would want your opinion, like I don't mind who wants to talk about that, but what for you is the biggest challenge as a youth person in the climate world and in climate negotiation? Like what is the thing that is that is the most difficult for us, and what is the biggest luck as a youth?
So the question is, what is the biggest challenge that you have faced? And also, how did you overcome that especially in the mainstreaming and negotiations.
So I think that the main challenge, one of the main challenge, is being young. For example, before coming here, I was in another event where I was talking as an ocean specialist. That's one of my fields. And the person that called me to be in the event, she didn't realize I was that young. When they saw that I was just 26 years old, they weren't pretty sure to put me in the panel because, of course, the whole panel was, let's say, experienced people in there. And I think that that's one of the many barriers that we have to end up with that belief that young people cannot be on the same seats and having the same opportunities to speak alongside with other experienced youth persons. We have a lot of knowledge, we have a lot of stories that we saw, and we have a lot of expertise that we can integrate into this fight and into these conversations. So that's something that has really happened alongside of this whole history, and I think that has been one of the many barriers I have been facing as climate activists, but also as young people.
Yeah, so I have a similar experience with Eddie, and how I overcame that was in 2018, I remember I had the chance to go for the adaptation committee meeting, and I focused on adaptation quite a lot, and how to transition from being a youth voice to become an expert on the topic was leading a research and having a couple of publications on this. So leveraging my master research in the university to really focus on this and get some knowledge products out and working with research institutions on this. Of course, I understand that not everyone will have the chance to do that. So it's very fundamental that when young people take the stage and they share their experiences, they should be seen as a voice that is credible and tangible. But in my experience, a way to really overcome this was having a couple of publications or articles out, and all of a sudden, people would invite me as an expert and not as a young leader anymore, but they would properly treat me as someone who is sort of credible to talk on the topic. So that is one way that could be looked at. Yeah.
I think one of the key challenges for me and for us indigenous people and local communities is about accessing these spaces. I think it's really difficult when on ground, like, we are living under the threat of eviction, land grabbing, and displacement. It's about life and death and livelihood, and still being able to, advocate and engage in this space is a difficult choice. It's a difficult decisions to be here. So I think it's also about reclaiming spaces, and most importantly, also it's about how do we ensure that we are taking all the efforts done by our ancestors ahead in our worldview. Because I think the challenge remains in making our worldview respected, acknowledged, and recognized in this entire discourse, because you can deal with unawareness, but you cannot deal with, strict denial. So I think that's one of the challenge. How do we go ahead it? I think there is hope and belief. I have seen my colleagues and friends in the youth movement who have come from a place of unawareness to be a strong ally and standing in solidarity. So it is about, continuing to advocate with the belief in yourself, and most importantly also engaging in research. I work as a researcher on research and advocacy on indigenous people and climate action. So I feel it's really critical to engage in research, because after having it in IPCC report about the rights of indigenous people and local communities over the land, forests and territories, supporting traditional knowledge and practices, and also coming up from leadership like Secretary General, has made a lot of difference. And I think we need solidarity and allyship on this in terms of engaging in different spheres and different forums and platforms to advocate it.
Thank you so much. I hope this answers your question. And thank you again to the amazing panelists for taking the time to join our session. I'd like to invite Alejandro back again to close us out.